I have hit record on the computer. And Carl, I am turning it over to you. Take it away.
You're muted, Carl.
I can't unmute him. So somebody, one of my co-hosts, can you unmute him? Carl, you may have to push a button to unmute.
There I
we
am.
go. Sorry about that.
Very good. Thank you. Here we go. Thank you. It's great to be back. Interesting to think about this again. Some of you have asked me, how am I doing? And I'm about 75% better. And I also have more time to go. We have other things to do. I guess I think about being a work in progress. And so that's where we are right now. I know this will not be perfect, but I do think it will get the job done. And certainly the handouts will help you as much as possible. So it's great to be back here right now. This is the book that we're going to do today. And of course, we do get done to people. People get to read the book, and we actually give it to other people. So what this is really a rags to riches story. And as you see from the title and the cover, the book is actually a chess analogy. So this is a person who's only is 48 years old. And he has a very interesting life. He has been a veteran. And when he came off of the service, he started getting some health clubs memberships. And then he started his own agency. And today it is down to about 12,000 agencies. And he also started a firm called Evasion. And that one is over $1 billion blues. So this is someone who didn't even get a college degree, but today he is worth over 180,000 million. Actually, it's 8,000 million. So he's done very well with what he did in his life. If you would like to, please go to the the top of the page. This is page number 2. What you see here is why is this book worth your time? And what you really get here is you get by being have the habit of thinking 5 moves ahead of everything that you do in business. On number 2, about in the middle of the part, it says, so what you want to do is continually invest on learning and growth. Try to invest yourself and always think about 5 moves ahead. We see on the handout, these are 7 takeaways that you will learn. And all of these would be great for business and growing a business for you. And so you can see this on the handout. If you will turn to page 3, I'm sorry. This is the premise of the book. It says that even successful entrepreneurs and chess grandmasters have the vision to look at pieces on top of him and think about what would be their next 5 moves. And so these are the benefits that you see in the handout. There's 5 benefits. It's one's about charity, strategy, growth tactics, skills, and insight. Now, what we have done for many times is we give you a chance to learn about the author. We have a little clip for you so you can see not only what he looks like, but also what he sounds like. And you can see this in the middle of page 3, what its title is. And if you want to watch all of it, I do have the link for you. So I'm going to have Randy do this for you, and we're ready to go. Randy.
So this brings me to starting a company.
Yeah.
Okay. When I started a company, I managed expectations with everybody up front. Let me explain what I mean by everybody up front. This is what I mean. Very simple. Babe, I just want you to know I am not going to buy you a house in the first 5 years of being married. What do you mean? We have the money. I'm not buying a house because I'm putting 100% of my money into business. But babe, we have money. Babe, I'm just telling you, that's what we're doing. Number 2, I'm getting you a $3,000 ring. You tell me which one you want, I'll get it for you. I'm not buying you a $30,000 ring, $20,000 ring. When we're married 10 years, then I'll get you a nice ring. Number 2, I don't do Louis Vuitton and Chanel purses. I do Coach purses. They're $300 to $500, and I'll get you a few per year. Once we have multiple kids and we have things going settle in place, you'll get your Chanel purse. Everything was once we do this, once we do this. So what happened with her, she has a choice to say what? This is too much.
Sure,
Or
she can just say, I'm not interested.
You seem too anal, this is too crazy, this is too insane. Or she can sit there and say, wow, okay, everything's organized, this is kind of managed expectations, let's go. So when I bought a house, she chose, what house do you want? Go pick it. No problem, we're getting this house. I want this house, no problem. I want to, no problem, but we got to that point. So with the company, I sat with everybody. And I want to build a reputation. Since I don't have a degree from Wharton Business School, since my last name is not Bob Ben Moshe, like he's a big CEO, MetLife and AIG CEO, my last name is Bet David. And if anybody's going to make that name Bet David, it's going to be me. Then my kids can say my dad is Patrick Bet David, right? Okay. I learned very early. If you do business with anybody, and you can sit up front and manage expectations with anybody that you're going to have a relationship with, friend, business, investors, anybody, and you tell them right up front where you're going to be at, you will gain so much respect from them long term, and you won't have to have that logical conversation with them 6, 12, 24 months from now that is going to come up. So that helped me save a lot of the relationships at a time where I was clueless about what it was to be a CEO.
Carl, back to you.
I hope you enjoyed that. And if you want to see more here, this is a channel on YouTube that he actually has. And so he's got a lot of tips and different things that he wants to do. Y'all, ever we started the book synopsis, one of the things that we do is we do key quotes. And so if you will turn to page 8, and it's about 3 quotes down here, you'll see key quotes, and I'll have a number of you that will get to see this, and I'll try to pick out a few that are going to be interesting to you. So the number 2 will be here, and that is to aspire to be heroic. Think about your heroes and ask yourself how they would ask in such situations. Creating a visual of your heroes will challenge you to live to the ideals of those who seek to emulate. Turn the page, and this is number 6. Building a business is not just ugly, it is messy. It is not just a cognitive effort, but an emotional one. When you take things personally, you get drawn into the chaos and cannot think clearly. Go to 16. I am not against motivation quotes or propaganda messages. I just find them useless without emotion and conviction behind them. Go to page 10. We're on number 12. I'm sorry, it is 21. If you implement the right intervention campaign and develop leaders, you will get momentum. The challenge is to maintain them. Go to 26. Infantry leaders surround themselves with yes people. Effective leaders surround themselves with people who challenge them. They also find and hire people who are much smarter than they are, especially in areas that they are weak. Go to page 11. We're on 33. The difference between being smart and being wise is that a smart person thinks that he has all the answers, whereas a wise person is comfortable knowing that he doesn't. I thought that was really good. You might want to circle that one. It's very good. Okay. Go next to number 41. Those who can tolerate pain the most, those with the most endurance, put themselves with the greatest chance to win in business. Make pain your fuel. Make paters and dieters to drive you. Go to 43. Turn off the noise of negative friends and people who are small thinkers. Turn off the noise of family members who don't support what you want to do. You often need to cut the fat around you. Anything that holds you back from thinking needs to stop. And finally, on 49, you can lose the sight of the biggest picture if you're constantly envious about a competitor. What is wrong is when you exacerbate a particular person, a competitor, your brother-in-law, a mentor, and a person who does not focus on astrology and also their elections. So I hope all of you have a chance to go ahead and read the rest of these, but we always wanted to have you a chance to be able to get a favor of the author. Now we're going to skip to number page 4. So if you'll go back here, page 4, and we're going to talk about the 5 moves in the book. And what this is about how to master the art of business strategy. So number 1 is to master, think about yourself. Master yourself here. And what you do is you ask, who do you want to be? And second is to study the most important project, and that is yourself. You can see about the middle way here. It says that be able not to be white for a crisis, okay, to determine what is your most important person, who is you. Get to be used with your questions, your own questions that are tough, and get clear about what drives you. And I did not put this in the handout, but if you buy this book or have a chance to look at it, there is an audit that you can take, which is a personal audit and see where you are in different parts of your life. And the other thing that it starts to talk about is getting wealthy, okay? And how do you win in business? And basically you have a choice to be an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur. And you'll see some of that in the book as we go. Go to number 2 here. That is to master the ability to reason. And so I want to show you the first little story here. This is about Aegon. And this is a business that we were with for a while. We had different projects that we did for books and presentations and so forth. But what happened, the author, he was only 30 and he had just started his own agency. And so within 5 weeks after starting that, Aegon put a lawsuit against him. And it had one simple goal, and that is to put the person or put the author out of business, even as he just started. And so if you look on your handout, this is things that perhaps a lot of you already know. It's the difference between what you can control and what you cannot control. And many of you may remember this more than 35 years ago. That's where Stephen Covey started the 2 circles. There were circles of concern and there were circles of influence. And so what you look at is that what can you control? And the next part would be what you cannot control. And what he says is that the most important thing was not being with revisions, okay, about Aegon, okay? Revision is what it's about. What is more important was focusing on his sales price and how to keep momentum going. And so it was a great lesson to be able to do that. If you will now go to page 6. One of the things that at the top here is talking about how they, and what he does is he sets clear up expectations, okay? So you need to be clear about that. And what he says in the book is that what you have to do in business is communicate your expectations. You have to do it clearly, early, and often. And so I like this very much. It's kind of funny to me, I guess, that it says you always set expectations like this. Bob, you have said that you're someone who shows up on time, but in the last 5 times, you have been late in 3 weeks. And Bob says, but it's only 8 minutes. And what he says is 8 minutes is 8 minutes too many. And you told us that you are reliable. Okay, we expect to be punctual. We expect you to know what you have to do. And if that continues, it's going to be an issue for us. So what he says is when you ever to start compromise, especially what your standards are, you're starting to get an environment that has low standards and it goes downhill from there. Y'all, when I worked at Dr. Pepper for 11 years, this actually happened with us. We had a woman who worked on us with us, and what he said, she would always be here about 5 or 6 minutes late, and she would go 5 to 6 minutes early, okay, to get done. And so we finally asked her, said, you know, do you know that these are hours and so forth? And what she said is that, oh yeah, I'm always on the premises. She said, it's not about that you're on my desk. What it is I'm in the premises. So we had a little lesson about that to make sure that she understands what she was supposed to be doing. All right, if you will go next to, this is number 7 here. We're going to talk about the idea of mastering to sale. And what he talks about here is what you have in leadership development. And of course, a lot of people talk about leadership and how you grow and what that is important to for your business and so forth. And he says it just doesn't start any place. You start at the time where you've got people who you want to have lots of different things to work on. You pick 5 people or so who wants to do that, and you sit down and talk about what they have to do in the next few years. And what happens is, as you are running a company, you are going to be judged about what kind of leadership that you developed. And what you do is you always look for people who just do not do orders, who follows orders. What you do is you grow with people because they have the capacity to grow and do things in different ways. In the handout, you see a good story about a friend of his, and his name was Chris Hayes, and he was in the NFL. And he caught a lot of different coaches. One of them was Bill Parcells, okay? And so we asked Chris, what is the most difficult coach you ever had? And Chris quickly said, Bill Belichick, okay? And at the time, Belichick was a assistant in Parcells for the New York Jets. And here's what he said, is that it's not even close. His expectations were so high. It was extremely noisome. All right, practice and training were freely abstained. Okay, you had to be perfect at everything you possibly can. He would pick on you for one little things, but you know that you were going to win because he wanted to win more than anybody else in the room. So you had no trouble to follow him. And so ultimately what he does in business is teach people how to be accountable for themselves, okay? In other words, you set the highest expectations you have for yourself. And he says that many people do not want that accountability. Many people staying for your best self is not for the faint of heart. That is why, by design, he is not easy to work for. It takes a few years to the term to be able to say that he has this pressure. But Belichick was, of course, very successful. This is funny. He said, do you believe that Tom Brady would have talked about Belichick as a picnic? No, because Belichick was so hard on Brady, it became better and better and better. And he says what happens is when the star is challenged, everybody has to raise their game as much as possible, and that becomes the norm. If you'll go to page number 8, and this is the part here on the left we have on number 5. This is to master power plays. And what he says is everyone wants to beat the dialist on his instances. What you want to do is make sure it's good for your reputation and what you're doing for business in the future. So you learn to control your own narrative, and you look on the way that you can use social media to give your story. He said the most important thing you can do here is turn off the noise, cut the fact, okay? And what happens is once you start controlling your own narrative, you get control of yourself. You have left time that you actually look for other people. And so what he says here is try to turn off the noise of negative friends and small spenders, okay? Turn off the noise of family members who don't support you. Don't even bring up things if they know the only thing you're going to hear is how negative they are. Anything that turns you out for thinking big needs to stop. Now, in your handout, you will see 10 of the takeaways, and I will have you to read these by yourself. But I hope that this has been helpful for you, and I hope you enjoyed some of this book. And like I said, we do give that away, and whoever learns this will get that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl. And I hope everyone will take a moment and give a little applause to Carl. And it's great to have him speak this morning. I'm going to begin the second presentation in about 30 seconds, but I do think you ought to look in the chat and take a look at, apparently Terry Egan's cat was on his keyboard. I don't often get to look at the chat, but that was pretty funny. So I'll begin in about 30 seconds. Me a little reassurance. We've been adjusting things. Letitia, if you can hear me, will you wave? Okay, so I can hear, I'm being heard okay. All right, good morning, everyone. And thanks to Carl Crayer, I am now beginning the second presentation on 10 lessons of the post-pandemic, for a post-pandemic world. So here we go. There are different kinds of books. There are business books, and then there are novels, and then there are social justice books. But this has always been a gathering focusing on business books. And this is the third book that
Randy, we lost your voice.
Randy, you need to unmute.
We lost your audio.
and I gave my copy of that away, The Post-American World by Fareed Zakaria. And then I presented this for a different audience. It was actually for a gathering of the World Affairs Council, a special book gathering, and it's called The Future of Freedom, Illiberal Democracy at Home and Abroad by Fareed Zakaria. And you see my very undesigned handout, and I presented that years ago. Fareed Zakaria does not write motivation books. He does not write practical books. A motivational book is a good thing to have, but that's not what he writes. And practical books are books that I consider like Getting Things Done by David Allen. Do this and do this and do this, and this will be the outcome. But this book is more a big picture, big context teaching book. And that's the kind of book he writes. If you've watched Fareed Zakaria on CNN, his program GPS, Global Public Square, every Sunday morning, if you've watched him, you know that he brings in people from all over the world, and he has a very big picture look. And what he has done in this book, and it is an immediate bestseller, is he has said, these are the lessons we can draw from the global pandemic. And they are big picture lessons. And to be honest, they're not even super clear in his lessons. He sort of just says, here are the 10 challenges to think about. I have written them in lesson form, and we'll look at that at a moment. But the point is, he says, we've got to pay attention to the really big issues on this. And so that's what this book does. I'd like you, I do jump around a little. I'd like you to turn all the way to page 12 in your handout for 10 lessons for a post-pandemic world. And at the top, I have a few stories. And these stories, the book is filled with insight and pieces of information told in some story form, but these stories are especially important at this moment. The first one is Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Warm Springs. If you do not remember, Franklin Roosevelt had polio, and he was a man of great prominence. He was probably the most influential president of the United States in the 20th century. And yet, every year, he went back to Warm Springs, where he had been treated and gathered with fellow polio sufferers for years. He ended up dying there, by the way. And so whenever you see a piece of italic here in this part of the handout, it's a direct quote from the book. Roosevelt never forgot them, his other polio sufferers, to his last breath, which he drew with them in Warm Springs. FDR understood in his bones what it felt like to be powerless. I think, and I know Zakaria thinks, I think that the fact that Roosevelt had polio allowed him to have an incredible level of empathy and compassion and sympathy and understanding of the needs of people, wealthy, poor, every kind of person who suffered from polio. And by the way, I saw something pop up on the internet yesterday. One of the things that helped people decide to take the polio vaccine was Elvis Presley having it put in his arm, and he did this in front of the press. Everybody understood that polio was a problem, and the vaccine was a lifesaver. All right. The second story, it's a quote about Tim Cook, Apple, and health. Apple CEO Tim Cook has said he believes that his company's greatest contribution to mankind will be about health. And I think that is really significant. If we have the data from our human bodies available immediately, so that we can see what's going on and what the problem is. And before you know it, it's going to be sent to the doctors automatically. The Apple Watch is a piece of this. CEO Tim Cook says what we do for health really matters. The next item, and the book really has quite a few stories about this, is that people are moving to cities. That's critical. And the book describes the massive migration into major cities. People are moving into cities all over the world, and cities are being built almost overnight in China, for example, going from small areas to booming cities. Sometime look at the largest cities in China, and you realize how many of them have millions of people that you may have never heard of. People are moving into cities, and they are becoming ever more digital. And I just did for a private client yesterday, my synopsis of the book, Digital Transformation by Thomas Siebel. And digital transformation was well underway, and it is on steroids during this pandemic. And then this is inequality. He says in this book that inequality, the gap between the wealthiest and the not very well off, is massive. And here is a specific example. Blacks have an overall COVID fatality rate 2.3 times higher than whites. In other words, the color of your skin somehow creates circumstances where you are more vulnerable to the dangers of the coronavirus. And then he has a story about when the world defeated smallpox. This is in my lifetime, in our lifetime. And what happened was you needed to have the cooperation of everybody. And the Soviet Union was not cooperating. The Soviet Union was not interested in cooperating with the rest of the world. And they finally came on board on this one issue, smallpox. And so here's the quote. By 1980, smallpox had been officially eradicated. The Harvard historian Erez Nanella says it was arguably the single most successful instance of superpower collaboration in Cold War history. And so the fact that the countries could come together and work together to tackle smallpox was an amazing development. So let's get into our minds the 10 lessons. Turn back to page 11, just the page before. Page 11. And at the top of the page, he's got, I pulled out, I usually have 3 or 4 of these. All of these are kind of the thesis of the book. This is a book not about the pandemic, but rather about the world that is coming into being as a result of the pandemic, and more importantly, our responses to it. In the case of the novel coronavirus, the impact is being shaped by the reality that the world is deeply interconnected, that most countries were unprepared for the pandemic, and that in its wake, many of them, including the world's richest nations, shut down their societies and economies in a manner unprecedented in human history. This book is about a post-pandemic world, not because the coronavirus is behind us, but because we have crossed a crucial threshold. We now know what it's like to have the world impacted by one worldwide global pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic could persist, but even if it is eradicated, take your pen and underline this: new outbreaks of other diseases are almost certain to occur in the future. With this knowledge and experience, we now live in a new era post-pandemic. The social and psychological consequences, fear, isolation, purposelessness, might endure even longer. COVID-19 is having deep and lasting effects on each of us, repercussions we cannot yet fully grasp. Here's what happened. A tiny vital particle circulating in a bat in China's Hubei province has brought the world to its knees, a real life example of the butterfly effect, whereby the flapping of a butterfly's wing might influence weather patterns on the other side of the world. Deadly pathogens, either man-made or natural, could trigger a global health crisis. It has, and another one could. And the United States is wholly unprepared to deal with it. Pathogens, viruses, and disease are equal opportunity killers. When the crisis comes, we will wish we had more funding and more global cooperation, but then it will be too late. We have to adjust to the reality of ever increasing instability now. Circle that sentence. There will be ever increasing instability. This book has described the world that is being ushered in as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic, but it is really describing forces that are gathering steam. This book, Ugly Pandemic, has created the possibility for change and reform. It's ours to take that opportunity or squander it. Nothing is written. Okay, turn back to page 12 now. And just below the stories are the 10 lessons. These are my wordings of the 10 lessons. What are the 10 lessons for our post-pandemic world? Number 1, the next dangerous moment is coming. We're in the middle of a dangerous moment. Another one is coming. Practice caution. That's number 1. He calls that chapter Buckle Up. And he says, we've got to buckle up for the next crisis. And he uses at the end of the chapter the idea that when you get in your car, you buckle up your seatbelt because you know a crash could come. You get ready for the crash. Lesson number 2, good government is required to meet the need. He calls the chapter, what matters is not the quantity of government, but the quality. But you've got to have good government in place to meet the need. Lesson number 3, sometimes markets cannot solve the problem. Think about the incredible government and private industry cooperation that is needed to get these vaccines out to everybody. We've already heard that they cut the number that they thought they could send very quickly. We look at other prior times, and you look at government and private industry working together on the polio issue and many others. And so he says markets alone cannot solve the problem. His chapter title is Markets Are Not Enough. Lesson number 4, we must respect expertise. His chapter title, People Should Listen to the Experts, and then experts should listen to the people. But we've got to get to the point where we understand that we need expertise. I used to tell my students, I think I've got it in my pocket, I said, I've got a pocket watch that my brother gave me. I've never carried a pocket watch in my life until recent years, when my brother gave me this beautiful pocket watch with a Latin phrase, Maiu de Fratrum, the brotherhood of the Maius. And so I say to my students in speech, I pull it out of my pocket and I say, I've got a pocket watch. If any of you need surgery, just give me a call and I'll come cut you open. I'm capable of doing that. None of them take me up on it. Of course they don't. That's the essence of ethos, credibility from Aristotle. You need somebody who is credible. You need expertise. And so people who have spent decades studying an issue are to be respected when you have a crisis. And so we must respect expertise. Number 5, everything that can be digital will be digital. Let me give you a little hint. Look at the valuation of the company Zoom. They went from nothing to over 100 billion overnight, because when the world had to become digital, there had to be a user-friendly platform, and that's what we have. And so everything that can be digital will be digital. Life is digital. Number 6, people need and will find a way to make and maintain a human connection. His chapter title is Aristotle Was Right, We Are Social Animals. And so the reality is that we need the human connection. We are missing it. I am missing it. If you watch the news, and you especially watch the healthcare workers in the places where people are dying from COVID, they are now facilitating Zoom interactions, digital interactions, because the families can't be close. People need human connection. We've got to find a way to protect that. Number 7, the 7th lesson is inequality is real and is a serious problem. The wealthy are getting wealthier and the rest are not. His chapter title, Inequality Will Get Worse. Chapter 8, the lesson is we will be global. And so his chapter title, Globalization is Not Dead. We talk about how we can do it all on our own. He said, the fact is we are a global society. I'll do my best to describe what he says. He said, globalization has done this, and now it's dropped a little, but it's not gone back down. And so it's done this, and it'll level off and drop a little, then it'll go back up. We are a global world, and it is impossible to function in today's world without acknowledging that and capitalizing on it. Lesson number 9, we are in fact divided in this country, and other countries across the world are seeing similar divisions, and this is quite a problem. His chapter title is The World is Becoming Bipolar. When people do not accept the same set of realities, and they end up fighting over them, and they find fault with everything, you have a dysfunctional society. And that's where we have arrived. And number 10, I called it, we need the dreamers. He's not talking there specifically about the dreamers in immigration, but it is sometimes his chapter title, The Greatest Realists Are the Idealists. that we need some dreaming idealists who dream of a better future. So those are the 10 lessons. They're not the kind of practical lessons that says wear a mask from noon to 4 p.m. They are big picture lessons. And that's typical of this book and his other books. Number 11, he had 10, but then he has an epilogue chapter. I called it, "It's Never Over." He has a quote from Lawrence of Arabia that is, "Nothing is written." When someone says to Lawrence, "It is written," he said, "No, nothing is written." And so we get to write the next chapter of the future. Now, here are some of the critical teachings in the book. There are crises, and there will be more crises. The three great crises of the 21st century, 9/11, and then the financial crash, and now COVID-19, one political, one economic, and one natural. And they basically occurred a little bit within about 10 years of each other. And Nassim Nicholas Taleb suggests that we create systems that are anti-fragile. I did this book at First Friday Book Synopsis. Anti-fragile. It's not just that they're resilient, it is that they are created to withstand the crisis and the attack. This is the same author who wrote The Black Swan. And he says that we create systems that are anti-fragile, which are even better than resilient ones. They actually gain strength through chaos and crises. Now, COVID-19 is not the first global deadly pandemic, and it will not be the last, but it's the first one in the modern world. And we really did know that it was coming, but we didn't get ready even though we knew it. And so in 1994, the book The Hot Zone came out, and it kind of predicted this. In 2011, the movie Contagion came out, and Bill Gates in 2015 gave a TED Talk. I'm on page 13 now of the handout. And he says, if anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus. In 2017, he sounded the alarm louder, predicting in a speech at the Munich Security Conference that there was a reasonable chance that such a pandemic would erupt in the next 10 to 15 years. And in 2005, President George W. Bush read The Great Influenza, the book by John Barry, and demanded a plan be developed for a great pandemic. And he demanded that plan, and it was put in place, and President Obama built up on the plan and left a plan in place. And I don't mean to get political, but that plan was not attended to and not heeded, and we were not ready. Now, the fact is, this would have been a crisis anyway. But let me tell you how big a crisis. Do you remember how the one event, 9/11, changed the way we travel? Do you realize that in the last 2 days in the United States, we've had approximately double the number of deaths of 9/11 in 2 days? That's a big crisis. You remember how they grounded the 737 MAX over 2 airplane crashes? The total number of people in those 2 airplane crashes is about 4 hours worth of COVID deaths in the United States at this moment. So this is an enormous crisis that we were not ready for, even though we were warned to be ready. It is what Zakaria calls, I'm on the next item here, a cascading failure. Ever since 1990, sudden massive seizures have gripped the world, about 1 every 10 years, with cascading effects. We will have more of these. It took only a small shift in housing prices to unravel altogether. That's 2008. The crisis was the economic equivalent of a cascading failure. We are, the next item, we are speeding up in so many ways. Digital is here. Here comes digital. We have created a world that is always in overdrive. The pandemic served as a forced mass product testing for digital life. And for the most part, our technological tools passed. We think about what would have happened if this had hit 15 years ago. And here's a quote from Cisco. And from 2005 to 2016, Cisco calculates the use of cross-border bandwidth grew 90-fold. And it is expected to grow an additional 13-fold by 2023. Here's an idea. We are in the early days of the crisis. Not just this crisis, but the crisis of globalization, pandemics, and other crises. And so we've got to develop this digital world. Now, there's a warning in the book. It's a famous warning. You can only have two of the three systems: open system, fast system, stable system. It turns out that in any system of these three characteristics, open, fast, stable, you can only have two. The reason we have a meeting room and the reason that we have people watching what people do on our Zoom event is because we had some crashers a couple of months ago. It wasn't stable. And so everyone is connected, but no one is in control. In other words, the world we live in is open, fast, and thus almost by definition, unstable. Now, a fast and stable one will tend to be closed, like China. So he's really raising the issue of what do we do about this? It's fascinating. About threats, advances in biology and technology mean that today it would take only a few trained scientists and a small investment to produce deadly pathogens. But nuclear weapons are hard to build and relatively easy to detect. And so what he's saying, in essence, is the experts are saying the real next threat is some kind of deadly pathogen. Not very comforting to me. There must, in fact, be global cooperation. Global cooperation. The eradication of smallpox is a story that is only partly about science and mostly about extraordinary cooperation between rival superpowers and impressive execution across the globe. Most urgently, countries need strong public health systems, and those systems need to communicate, learn from, and cooperate with one another. President Bill Clinton explained, we cannot repeal the international economic competition that is everywhere. We can only harness the energy to our benefit. And I think he's right about that. Now, if you wanted to ask what's the idea that really bothered you in this book? I mean, I'm bothered about pandemics and I'm bothered about this pandemic, but put a box around this next section. America, the vetocracy. America, the vetocracy. America has become what Francis Fukuyama calls a vetocracy. The system of checks and balances replicated at every level of government ensures that someone somewhere can always block any positive action. The US has become a nation of naysayers. Somebody can stop practically anything. In each effort, it turns out one group or interest found a way to derail the project. In a dynamic where so many players can exercise a veto, it's nearly impossible to move a project forward. No one today has the leverage to do what seems to be best, this is a quote about New York, for New York as a whole. Ultimately, government is rendered incompetent. One version of the vetocracy NIMBYism, named for the rallying cry of those opposed to local construction, not in my backyard, hobbles worthwhile projects across the country. Look at the housing crisis in the San Francisco area for everyday workers. They can't get affordable housing. Teachers cannot afford to buy a house in San Francisco. America is really the 0 to 1 economy. I did the book 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. As Peter Thiel says, every company's goal is to be a monopoly. It then follows that successful companies will try to use their resources to eliminate the competition. Market-centric thinking has invaded every area of human life, leaving little space for other values like fairness, equality, or intrinsic value. It's 8:34. I intended to end at 8:35. I want about 3 more minutes. On page 2, on the bottom left, what is the point? The world has changed and is changing due to the pandemic of 2020. This is a moment for good and needed change in a number of ways. And so I think this book says, embrace the change, ride the change, and help defeat the crises and make things better. 3 reasons this book is worth our time. It's a short history of many pandemics and crises through the decades and centuries. The history will remind us that we're not the first and we won't be the last to face a challenge. Number 2, this book is a good reminder of the consequences of countries acting alone on the world stage, especially in a moment of crisis. And number 3, it's a good primer. This book is a good primer on the value of and limitations of expertise, including scientific expertise. On your own later, work through these quotes. I've got a few pages of them, and especially when you see one in bold or larger font, read those. On page 4, I'm reading number 30. Developing countries are modernizing so quickly that they effectively inhabit several different centuries at the same time. That's quite a line. Countries are modernizing so quickly that they are effectively inhabiting several different centuries at the same time. In the shadows of the skyscrapers are wildlife markets full of exotic animals, a perfect cauldron for animal to human viral transfer. Number 32, we're doing things every day that make pandemics more likely. All right, turn to page, turn to page 8, number 86. Now that the world has experienced a global pandemic, it should have become painfully clear that people need to listen to the experts. There were warnings about this pandemic. We did not listen. We didn't know that it would be this month of this year, but there were warnings. And then on page 9, number 109, in other words, by almost all measures since the 1990s, globalization has galloped forward, and in the last few years, it has taken 1 or 2 steps back. That's not deglobalization, that's a pause. That's what I was trying to describe as I raised and lowered my hand a while ago. Well, let me encourage you to read all of those quotes. Now turn back to page 14 for my 6 lessons and takeaways. Number 1, we really are slow to learn. We had the warnings, we didn't listen. We're slow to learn. Book after book tells us this. We're slow to learn in every arena. We need to tackle that. Number 2, we really are bad at asking this question: what could the bad, unintended consequences be of our decisions and our actions? Number 3, the US is still the clear leader in global GDP, but competition with China will become more intense with great potential danger over the long haul. That was really the subject of his book, The Post-American World. You see it in here. He didn't say that America, the United States, is going down. He said the rest of the world is catching up, and the big dog in the rest of the world is China. Number 4, the present and especially the future lies in the digital arena. Number 5, maybe it is time to understand and act as though there are no little people. That's a phrase from a Christian theologian from decades ago. There are no little people. Attitudes toward people previously ignored or overlooked are shifting, as can be seen in the newly adopted phrase, essential workers. Tell me somebody more important than those nurses and doctors and helpers in those COVID wards of our hospitals, and the people who deliver packages for us so we don't have to shop in crowds. Essential workers. There are no little people. And number 6, we all together, we can all create a better future, and we must. 10 Lessons for a Post-Pandemic World by Fareed Zakaria. Hope you found it useful. Thank you very much. Do me the courtesy, if you would, of staying online for about 4 more minutes, and I want to share a few brief announcements. Then we'll open up the microphone to have conversation afterwards. So I'm sharing the screen again. All right. I meant to show you that before on how my handouts are. We will give stuff away when we return to normal life. There are some other events to encourage you to attend. Success North Dallas meets every 3rd Wednesday at 7 a.m. And this month it will be on Zoom. And the speaker is Mitchell Levy, and he's speaking on Credibility Nation. You can't be credible externally until you are credible internally. So Credibility Nation. And I want to invite all of you to attend on Zoom the Urban Engagement Book Club on November 19, the 3rd Thursday of each month. But this month, I am presenting a remarkable book called Caste: The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. I have read a lot of books on racial issues. This is the new best book. It is remarkable. 12:30 on Zoom. Mark it in your calendar. Thursday, the 3rd Thursday of the month, November 19. Check my blog for Zoom information. If you would like to sign up on our email list, go to 15minutebusinessbooks.com. If you would like to donate towards this event, you can do it with the PayPal link that should be available on the chat, or through Zelle, send it to randymayu@sbcglobal.net. I want to mention that the New York Times bestsellers list for December is out. There are 10 books, beginning with number 1, Atomic Habits, and going down to number 10, Make Life Beautiful. In January, by the way, I and Carl presented one of these, Thinking Fast and Slow, and I have presented 6 of them: Atomic Habits, Dare to Lead, 10 Lessons for a Post-Pandemic World, Extreme Ownership. Ed Savage was our guest presenter on Leadership by Doris Corns Goodwin. And then I'm doing Post-Corona in January. So we've done a bunch of these. And in January, mark your calendar, we're not meeting the first Friday of January. That's January 1. We're meeting January 8, the 2nd Friday on Zoom. And I'm doing the new book, Post-Corona, From Crisis to Opportunity, on the bestsellers list. And I'm picking up a book that I've never presented, and we should have presented back when it came out, I think in 2017, could be a year before that. It's called The Obstacle is the Way: The Timeless Art of Turning Trials into Triumph by Ryan Holiday. I've done 2 other books by Ryan Holiday. He is terrific. We've got, I do book synopses within organizations on racial issues, and I do business books. And you can get these synopses that you've missed either at 15minutesbusinessbooks.com. Look for our newest editions. And I'm putting these Zoom ones up on YouTube. And so as we close our December meeting, I would like to say Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. But instead, I will say Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good book. Merry Christmas. Thanks for attending First Friday Book Synopsis. I'm stopping the share, and we are opening the microphones. You can unmute yourself, and let's visit. Thank you.